Hey everybody, welcome to The Hang Up. It's Wednesday, 7 p.m. Central. Today is December 15th, 2021. That's when we're doing this live. It's the last show before I go in for heart surgery. And if you've ever had a bowl of Rice Krispies and milk, that sound is the sound that my lungs would make whenever I opened my mouth after I'd done some physical exertion. And so it would just sound like Rice Krispies. And I Googled it because, you know, Dr. Google is the first thing that I'm going to do before I actually go talk to my doctor. And it turns out that that's a very common symptom of congestive heart failure. But the next thing that happened is we decided, let's go for the gold standard. Let's take me in and do an angiogram. Because that way, basically they went in right here through my wrist. And they thread a catheter all the way up into my heart and pop some dye in there and take pictures. And so the whole process is there. I actually have, David can put it up on the screen. This is what they drew after the angiogram was over. Now, they told me that they would only be able to put in stents in arteries if the occlusion was 70% or less. That's the right artery of the heart, and it's 100% blocked. On the left side, the first branch, primary branch right before that fork, is 90% blocked. The other branch is 85 to 90% blocked higher. And yeah, flipping it isn't going to make it easier to read. And then further down, there's one that's like 60 to 70% blocked, etc. What's going to happen is I'm going to, next Wednesday, instead of doing an episode of The Hangout, I'm going to be going in for a quadruple or quintuple bypass, cardiac bypass graft surgery.
I'm not tied to anybody at all. I'm lone wolf atheist. Every single association I've had, apart from, with Seth and Aaron, I guess, has left me burned.
Me and Matt Dillahunty and his wife had a fallout on Facebook about the fact that they were claiming that prejudice plus power equals racism. That racism only exists systematically or systemically. So, in other words, black people can't be racist.
What Beth's meme, or it wasn't even her meme, she posted it. She didn't even actually give her initial opinion on it to begin with. But it was saying, look, we have these words, bias, prejudice. I don't think bigotry was on this one, but it's also in the conversation, and racism. And if two words are used as synonyms, if what you mean by racism is what everybody means by prejudice, then we're kind of wasting. We've got two words here to say the same thing. And maybe because there are complicated issues here, we can start to use one of the words in a different way so that prejudice and racism aren't synonyms. Prejudice refers to this particular thing, and racism we can take to apply to systemic racism or institutionalized racism.
Yeah, I think he's trying to defend his wife, and I don't have any problem with that. But at the same time, I think he's incredibly arrogant. I think he thinks his shit don't stink, and he's a fucking genius, and we're all fucking beneath him like little peasants.
I mean, I'm used to that condescending shit from atheists, because every YouTube atheist thinks they're the smartest YouTube atheist. I mean, are you included in that, TJ?
Definitely the smartest YouTube atheist.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. See, so I mean, that's a common delusion per se.
They're all idiots except me. I'm a genius.
They should be better than that, and they should really get away from all this atheism plus all this third wave feminism. It doesn't do our community any good. It's driving people away from them. They get so much shit about it. I don't know why they continue to do this. It's embarrassing is what it is.
And I got tired of countless. I couldn't post a video. I posted a video about Pascal's wager, and people are saying, oh, atheism plus or feminism, whatever. It had absolutely nothing to do with it.
For those who don't know Matt's wife, she's a huge feminist, rabid feminist, one of these third wave feminists, and a huge social justice warrior. So she posted a meme that basically, the gist of the meme was that only white people are capable of being racist. That it's this idea that the loony left is spreading nowadays, that it's not racism unless it's institutionalized racism. And of course, only white people have power institutions, so only white people are capable of being racist. Which is in itself an incredibly fucking racist idea. So me and Matt kind of got in a fight about that on Facebook. He basically called me a bunch of names. He called me a piece of shit. Said I was too stupid to debate him, and I was like, "Let's do it, motherfucker! Let's debate right now." But he refused to debate me, and he went on the Drunken Peasant Show, which was TJ's podcast at the time. Yeah, I guess he's no longer on it, but and he wouldn't go on the show if I was allowed on there with him. He wouldn't go on. Yeah, he wouldn't allow me to debate him. So anyway, when I went on, I acted like an asshole. And I basically told him that I thought his wife wanted my dick. I think Matt might have been a little butthurt by that. I don't know. I don't know why she stayed there without him. I don't know what the deal was or what. But I asked her to take a picture, so she took a picture of me. I don't know if that's my profile picture, if you guys are on my Facebook. And so then I left. The first thing I said to the dude when I left is, I think Matt Dillahunty's wife wants my dick. Because I did. That's what I thought. And I don't even talk like that. That's the thing. Like, I don't even fucking talk. I've never said that about a woman in my life. Mm-hmm. I'm not that kind of guy, but I was just being a fucking jerk. This is how I felt. I think that maybe they're swingers, and maybe she was going to proposition me to have a three-way with them or something. And so he, like, walked off so it'd be less awkward. Like, that's what I think happened. Now, I don't fucking know, but that's what I think probably happened.
But he goes on his Facebook and says Matt Dillahunty's wife is a cunt and she did all this stuff to me. So, and then he comes on our show and basically lays out the narrative of she's in love with him, or has a crush on him, whatever. She wants the D from him, and that's why she's acting like this. And you're a cuck, and he's talking shit.
It seems like some of these guys could do better. I'm sorry. I mean,
I feel the same way about Matt Dillahunty. I'm like, dude, you're famous. Step it up.
Yeah, I mean, like you're the headline speaker, dude. Do you really have to be with this psycho? But
I've been straight up to the trophy wife, dude. You made it.
Every single association I've had, apart from with Seth and Arn, I guess, has left me burned. I have 7,000 plus unread emails right now, and countless people trying to, get me to do a debate or whatever else. I've got to draw lines and say, okay, this is or isn't worth my time.
What it is they have these atheist conventions, and for the first time, unlike high school, guys like Matt Dillahunty and him at Meta get to be the cool kids. And they do. That's true. I've been to these conventions, and you can watch these guys. They think they're just the coolest shit, and they form these little cliques together. And so they spread this social justice warrior bullshit, and they hate on all of us and like to think they're superior to us. And they try to act like bullies by attacking us. They do not like me. They do not like you. They do not like Jacqueline. That's exactly the reason him at Meta has attacked me on his blog. That's exactly the reason he's attacked Jacqueline. It's because they don't like any of us. They're these fucking snobs that think they're above us, and they're not. You're not fucking above us. I'm sorry. We put asses in seats better than you do. And I know that fucking pisses you off, but it's the truth. Just deal with it. When they go to these atheist conventions, they're very cliquish. And for some reason, at these atheist conventions, these extreme feminist social justice warriors have taken over, like him at Meta and Matt Dillahunty. And a few, I won't name the other ones, but there's a few of them that form these cliques. And I think they just all feed off each other.
You said that your views on animal morality are speciesist. So
yes.
With that, did you mean that it is okay to kill animals and, let's say in the context, like needlessly when you don't need to? So if you're at a grocery store, if you have access to a grocery store and you can either choose to eat a fully vegan diet or if you choose to eat an omnivorous diet, it's okay to needlessly kill an animal for food just because it's a different species than you? Is that what you meant by speciesist?
Yeah, so this is the thing what I mean about people arguing dishonestly. Because when you say, is it okay to needlessly kill an animal, you are injecting all sorts of context into this. My position is really simple. I am not convinced that eating meat is immoral.
Okay, well, there needs to be a context. I mean, if you needed to eat meat to survive, like if you were an indigenous person and you lived in a tribe, I'd say it is morally acceptable to eat meat because you need to survive. But
okay.
You're obviously not in that position. You have access to a grocery store. You don't need to kill animals to live and be healthy. Okay, so you're basically claiming that it's okay to needlessly kill animals because they're not a part of our social contract and it doesn't affect us.
No. See, this is what I talk about when you guys are so repeatedly dishonest.
I did not say.
I'm not dishonest.
Yes,
Look, I'm
yes, you are, Richard, and I'm going to prove it to you and everybody else again right now, because I already called you out for this same thing a few minutes ago. I at no point said that it was okay to needlessly kill animals. You cannot take. Shut up.
Matt.
Shut up. You cannot take my position and respin it and paint it with your poisonous, fallacious framing. The problem here is that you are assuming that I am making a case for something being morally permissible when I am saying that I have not been convinced that something should be morally impermissible. There are moral obligations and there are moral virtues. And I am happy to acknowledge that someone who never kills an animal and lives their life that way may be more morally virtuous than me. Matter of fact, I'll say it now. I think they are. That is not the same as a demonstration that there is a moral obligation to not kill animals for food. And when I talk about where I draw lines and why, it has to do with rights, the ability to understand rights, and the social contract we make and where we extend it to.
You're basing your moral outlook on two things.
On what?
Social contract and reciprocation of rights.
No, I'm not. I'm basing my moral outlook on well-being. I'm basing my moral position, well-being, period. And when I talk about where I draw lines and why, it has to do with rights, the ability to understand rights, and the social contract we make and where we extend it to.
Not once did Dillahunty mention social contract or anything that resembles social contract theory.
It has to do with rights, the ability to understand rights, and the social contract we make and where we extend it to.
Not once did Dillahunty mention social contract or anything that resembles social contract theory.
Well-being, period. Okay, well, do you think it's...
I'm basing what rights are given based on the things that you just mentioned, including reciprocation, but not the individual ability for an individual to reciprocate, but the categorical potential for reciprocation within a group.
Okay, well, Matt, if your moral, like if the basis for morality is well-being, then you should be in favor of veganism because it's not within the best interest, of animals to kill and eat them. Okay, so the issue here is rights, whether or not we should extend.
No, the issue here is whether or not there's a moral obligation.
Is rights, whether or not we should extend.
No, the issue here is whether or not there's a moral obligation to not kill and eat animals, not whether or not it might be morally virtuous.
Okay, so why do you believe it's not a moral obligation?
Because nobody from your side has made an argument that it should be a moral obligation. The default is freedom until there's a good reason to limit that freedom. The default is maximal rights.
Freedom to needlessly kill animals.
What, sorry?
You think it's infringing on your freedom to needlessly kill animals that can think and feel just like you.
Bye.
Oh. Wow, okay.
À-bas-le-ciel.
The other day, I blocked someone on Twitter, and they were very, very upset and suggested that me blocking them on Twitter was somehow me silencing them. But when I block someone on Twitter, that's for me. I'm the only one who no longer sees their content. I block people for the sake of my own sanity, my own health. And while I'm going through things where the doctors are saying, try to make sure your pulse doesn't get above 120, and if you're feeling faint or whatever, take a break, it becomes more necessary to block some people. Well, I'm getting ready to go have, well, maybe not the best Christmas ever, although I am supposedly getting almost a new heart out of this Christmas, even though that wasn't necessarily my plan. And I'm going to do everything in my power to recover and get back so that when we get into 2022, I can not only help guide people to the events that we're going to be doing at various conventions and everything else, but provide content that you guys benefit from.
Matt Dillahunty saying, quote, I don't make arguments against veganism, ellipsis, ever, ellipsis. But I'm starting to think that eating meat is required for clarity of thought. Oh, Matt, old boy. Oh, Matt, you're 50 years old and you don't really know where milk comes from. Oh, Matt, we just saw you doing a 2.5-hour debate that was ever so erudite and one-sided, in which you ultimately couldn't do anything but plead ignorance. Oh, Matt, you old rib tiggler, you. Matt, you dirt ignorant Texan ex-military know-nothing, no-talent bum. Why is Matt Dillahunty taken seriously? Why? He became a radio personality in Texas, on Texas community radio, on the basis of nothing. He became known and to some extent respected for, on the one hand, being an agony aunt. That's an old-fashioned slang term. Listening to people and their problems over the radio, which is, people called in and said, boy, I'm really upset because I've quit the church and now my whole family hates me, doing that kind of sympathetic reception call. And then on the other hand, he just bullied people on the phone. It was really, there's no reason to respect this guy intellectually. There never has been. I don't make arguments against veganism, ever. Matt Dillahunty continues. And you've still failed to accurately represent my position. Have some bacon and try again. Oh, Matt. Oh, Matt, you slay me. You slay me with your refined debate stylings and sensibility. Could this be the same Matt Dillahunty who took on the erudite Richard, I think high school dropout, Vegan Gaines, and managed to lose and then lie about it on the internet later in his latest interview with Cosmic Sky? He says, oh, well, yeah, Vegan Gaines, he had some really bad arguments. And in fact, he even agreed with me. Yeah, right, Matt. That's how that conversation went. Jesus Christ. Anyway, to wrap this up, Matt Dillahunty's quote continues. Yet more confusion and assertions, when the reality is that I'm correctly applying the burden of proof, which, if you could meet it, another little witticism, if you could meet the burden of proof, MEAT question mark? Oh, Matt Dillahunty, oh. If you could meet that burden of proof, you wouldn't need to tweeting against straw men. Adios. And then, here's the big conclusion. Moral obligation versus moral virtue. Learn that first. So look, it's possible for me to imagine a conversation in which Matt Dillahunty was really using this distinction of moral obligation versus moral virtue to solve a problem. That's what philosophy is supposed to be all about. And he's not. I mean, this is a totally snide and insincere, dismissal of the problem. Now, also the concept of burden of proof. Sometimes burden of proof can be very important, scientifically, philosophically, even legally. This is a joke. This is just totally insincere, dismissal of veganism, basically. And again, we've just seen recently how totally incapable he is of taking on those kinds of questions, those kinds of problems. If you've been watching this channel for a long, long time, I actually discussed the ethics of the fact. We had a leader in the vegan movement. We had a guy here on YouTube who photographed himself wearing a Nazi t-shirt. And I point out, look, what we're really judging here is not that the t-shirt does any harm, because a lot of people use kind of phony utilitarian ethics here. The t-shirt did not kill millions of people. Buying the t-shirt doesn't give money to Adolf Hitler or the Nazi Party. He actually, in that case, made the t-shirt himself. Why is it so immoral? Why is it ethically such a big deal that he wears this t-shirt and approves t-shirt? It's because the judgment we're making is on you. It's on the kind of person you are and who you aspire to be. The judgment here about Matt Dillahunty is about what kind of man are you. That's ultimately what this is. If you go around wearing a t-shirt that says, I don't care about greenhouse gas emissions, pork and bacon or something. If you wear a t-shirt that says chicken wings for life or whatever, I don't care about heart attacks, you just want to eat beef, you don't care about animal rights, you just want to eat deep fried chicken. That tells me a lot about you, Matt, it tells me a lot about your morality and the way you so cynically invoke, moral obligation versus moral virtue. Which again, from what I've seen, I don't, okay, if this were, a legitimate area of philosophical inquiry, if this was a philosophy that really meant something, what problem does it solve? What is the research question that is addressed by this? Now, really, really briefly, I have been in several debates about the existence of objective morality with people who were sincerely interested in talking about it. And one of the things I point out in those debates, this isn't the end of the discussion, but I say, look, suppose you have two people and one believes the value of art is completely subjective. It can never be, fully specified, iterated, or it can never be made objective. That ultimately beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Whether or not something is a great painting depends on different kinds of cultural and interpersonal and maybe even economic and aesthetic considerations that ultimately are utterly subjective. They're no more real than a dream. People decide the Mona Lisa is a great painting, and then it's a great painting because a bunch of people feel that way, and that's about it. And people can change their minds. A work of art, a film, a movie is considered the greatest film of its era, and 10 years later doesn't seem so great anymore. That's it. There's nothing objective. And then suppose someone else enters that debate, that discourse, and says, no, they feel really strongly that there is an objective set of criteria that define some films as objectively good films and some as objectively bad, some paintings as objectively good, that there is some spectrum of objectively real criteria that can establish whether art is good or bad. Even if that were conceded, unless their position is that all art can be objectively evaluated this way, then the argument is ultimately ridiculous and spurious and immaterial. Because, look, if you take a great painting, if you take the Mona Lisa and you light it on fire, and then you display the burned ruins, the burned remains of the Mona Lisa, can you make an argument that objectively it's not a great painting anymore? It's not visible anymore. It's been charred and it's been damaged beyond recognition. Oh, okay, so we seem to be dealing with an objectively real criterion of something being a good painting. Like, you can see it, a great work of architecture still has to be standing and not destroyed in an earthquake. A great film, we've been watching Game of Thrones recently and the lighting is so bad. So maybe there are objective criteria for lighting and color balance, something like this. Once you're into objective criteria, you're never going to be talking about the range of things that we're really debating that really matter in real life and art. So really, really briefly, if you have a bunch of applicants for a scholarship, let's keep it on the same topic. You have a bunch of aspiring young painters who send in their best works of art, send in their drawings and their paintings, and say, hey, I want a scholarship to go to arts college. I want an opportunity to study at some art academy. You are not going to be debating. If you are on the committee who chooses the winners and losers, choose who gets the scholarship and who does not, you are not going to be debating objectively great art and objectively terrible art, or something being objectively good and bad art. If any of the applicants are so terrible that there's no debate about it, that it's in that realm, then those are not going to be what your attention is focused on. If any of them are so wonderful, it's like, oh, wow, this kid is amazingly fantastic, then they're in the pile of people who are definitely getting the scholarship. All of your time and energy is going to be on the cases that are near the borderline, near the cutoff, where it's like, well, look, we only have 50 scholarships. We can give 50 students a chance at this education. So you're probably not even going to discuss the best 40, and you're not going to discuss the worst 200, however many you got. Okay, there are going to be just a couple of cases near the cutoff line, and all of the time and effort of the committee is going to be directed towards that. So this brings us back to a case like Cuba, a case like Iran. Okay, Cuba is not Nazi Germany. It's not. There aren't gas chambers. There isn't a Holocaust going on there that's so unbelievably awful that it justifies invading Cuba and shutting down the gas chambers. If it were, it wouldn't be difficult to talk about, right? Human rights problems in Iran, they're bad, not remotely as bad as Nazi Germany. It doesn't cross any of the thresholds where you can say, okay, look, they're digging mass graves. This is a situation so extreme that we have to have war and intervention, okay? The other examples I used, prostitution, the view of the left wing and the right wing and the center on prostitution. It's a problem. The corrupting influence of prostitution in society, whether it's, my ex-girlfriend going to her high school and there being recruiters there, or actually I've heard that a lot about Japan too. There being kind of recruiters on the streets of Tokyo. Okay, there are these, troubling questions about prostitution. But this is not in the realm of some kind of objectively real humanitarian disaster where we then don't have to have the conversation. Okay, drinking water is poisoning people and they're dropping dead in the thousands. No debate. It's an objectively real problem for government policy. Government's going to intervene. Guess what? Even if it's counter to your constitution, if you happen to be living in a country where, like, let's say that it's said in the constitution, the federal government will have nothing to do with drinking water, that remains the municipal government's problem. It's just for the city government. Doesn't matter. They'll send in the FBI or the CIA, or they'll send in the National Guard, they'll send in the Army. They'll do, oh wow, people are dropping dead because there's a drinking water problem. We're into the realm of objectively real problems. So again, at what point is it a moral obligation as opposed to a moral virtue to have government intervention, to have policy intervention, to have these kinds of political intervention? It's irrelevant. Those are never going to be the cases we're paying attention to. We're always going to be looking at questions of virtue, and we're going to be looking at the most dubitable, the most doubtful, the most, the gray areas that are the hardest to deal with, right? I mean, I don't see anyone really sitting around wanting to morally ponder whether or not you should have an intervention when it's an absolute clear-cut case of mass poisoning, mass murder, or something. Okay, these are areas where we need government intervention as soon as possible. Even an earthquake. That's the earthquake that destroyed Haiti. I forget how many years ago now. Okay, gee, we need some kind of intervention. Okay, you know what? I've been to downtown Los Angeles. I've been to the beach. Where was that? Venice Beach, Los Angeles. I could take some photographs of Venice Beach in Los Angeles where the humanitarian disaster looks worse than some parts of Haiti after the earthquake. You got people, sleeping on the street, sleeping in tents. You've got a kind of slow motion humanitarian disaster in Venice Beach in Los Angeles, right? We're never going to be discussing or debating the situations of moral obligation. All of these debates are going to be in the area of moral virtue, and they're going to be in the most gray, the most indecisive, the most difficult areas of moral virtue. Okay? Look, guys, I'll wrap it up for this video there. Matt Dillahunty always was an idiot. His whole line of approach on objective morality and moral obligation is not a philosophy. I would go so far to say that this is an anti-philosophy because it's doing the exact opposite of what a philosophy ought to do. Philosophies are about problem-solving methods. They are not about obfuscation. And all he's doing with his quote-unquote philosophy is obfuscating and evading the point when he is presented with a genuine philosophical problem. And compared to the future of Iran, the future of Cuba, the future of Venice Beach, Los Angeles, or the future of prostitution, veganism has got to be one of the easiest moral quandaries to think your way out of. Someone who dodged the call from Vegan Gains again and again and again until he was, Vegan Gains was trying to set up an appointment. Someone who's dodged, you spent your whole life dodging these questions. That's what you are, man. Matt Dillahunty, you are a moral and intellectual coward, and yet you've made a career out of grandstanding on what you yourself say is one of the simplest issues in the world to grandstand on. You think you're a genius because you figured out that when you pray to God, nobody is listening. Well, clap, clap, clap. You caught up with something most of us knew at 12 years old, and that doesn't put you in any position of moral leadership. It doesn't make you an intellectual. It doesn't make you a philosopher. It makes you a pathetic, self-important, dried-up Texan military man. And I know, we all know, but after he did the radio show, he used to post where they would go to dinner after they did the radio show. He said, supporters of the show can come and eat here. You can see the fucking menu. And Matt, if you got to age 50 and you never really sat down and wonder, where does cheese come from? You're still catching up with a whole lot of stuff that we knew at about age 12. And ultimately, the purpose of philosophy is not just to understand the world. It's to change it. I don't know how you've managed to go so far as a public intellectual while having absolutely no positive vision of the future, of the world being a better place, and of what you've got to do, the sacrifices you've got to make, the kind of commitment and hard work you'd have to do to accomplish it. It's just too much to ask for Matt Dillahunty to stop eating bacon, to stop eating cheese. Matt, when you read the history books, who do you look up to? I've never really heard him talk about books he read in that way. He really seems to be a kind of illiterate troglodyte, to be quite honest with you. But like, you know, who are the heroes now for people in secularism? I mean, is it Galileo standing up and dying, you know, for what he believes in? Is it Socrates? You know, Socrates, who ultimately was put to death for what he believed in. You know, whose shoes would you walk a mile in, Matt? I mean, is it somebody like Martin Luther King, whose life, again, died with a bullet to the head, but who before that went through, I mean, you know, Matt, if you believe in this cause, this benighted cause you've chosen for yourself, I think it's time for you to stand up and start being a little bit more of a heroic figure. If not at age 50, you know, when is it going to be, Matt?
Gotta do it like I'm used to it, bitch.
There's a contingent of the ethical vegan community that, much like a contingent in the atheist community, just have really bad arguments. And I'm undeniably speciesist about this. I drink milk. I've eaten cows too, but the thing is, even if you know, like, you've got
probably
vegans,
came from the same cow, you know.
It's entirely possible. So you've got vegans, and then you got vegetarians and ovo-lacto and blah blah blah. I drink milk, and for a while I was convinced that this is a non-issue. Clearly not even in the same ballpark as whether or not I would kill and eat a cow. And then someone raised the issue of, okay, you've got a situation where a cow is given birth and its calf is taken away so that it will keep producing milk.
Yeah, after forcible insemination.
Yeah. And have you considered the emotional impact on a cow of having, you know, its offspring removed from it and then, you know, continue to give milk? And the answer at that time was no, I hadn't considered that at all. And my answer now is, I don't know that we can actually assess the psychological trauma of a cow. I don't know necessarily how we would go about it, because what I see people doing is saying, oh, an animal looks up at you with those eyes or tries to run away, so clearly it's expressing its desire to not be eaten. And quite frankly, I don't think that most animals can process that on a cognitive level to where they're expressing no, don't eat me. Having lived and grown up on a farm and been around cows and milked cows, granted, I'm not remotely an animal psychologist, I don't see any of the presentations that we would say, yes, this cow is suffering psychologically in the same way that a human would. Yes, I am opposed to factory farms that engage in cruelty, but I've also lived and grown up on farms, and
which, by the way, I do clarify, that just means you're against factory farms.
Yes.
Like, I don't think you say you're against factory farms, which are kind of overly cruel to animals. That just means you're against factory farms.
No.
Gotta do it like I'm used to it.
No.
Let the music bow on through the channels in your brain as your eardrums twitch. This boogie from the fire swing. A mellow ghetto beat brings a nigga to his feet. Sunshine, blue sky, chronic and hoes on the street. I tiptoe to the bathroom, I brush my teeth, look in the mirror, seen a G. Then he merged up the duck to a pancake foe, so I can go knock a hawk like a pro. Dilly duck and I tiptoe and top cat liquor store to buy some drink and zigzag for this thing. The very same wine, no begging for change, getting drunk, telling lies. It's the same old thing.
What we are talking about is a situation in which the single biggest thing that you can do to tackle climate change, the single biggest thing you can do to minimize unnecessary suffering without actually having to suffer in a meaningful sense yourself is as simple as just choosing something else on the menu. That's the situation we're in. And to me, it's very difficult to see how, if we're making a distinction between moral obligation and virtue that is meaningful in any way, how that could possibly not fall within the category of obligation.
I don't remotely disagree. The thing is...
So you think it does fall within the category of obligation?
Well, you, not necessarily you, somebody can give me the information and data and make that argument. Because right now, no offense to you, I'm happy to accept that you know far more about this than I do, and that your information is likely to be correct. But quite frankly, this is easily the longest conversation I've ever had about this particular subject, and I can't just, as much as I like you, I couldn't possibly just take you at your word. So this is just an issue of ignorance on my part. Is there a way for me to eat meat where I don't have any of the immoral problems? One of the things to consider is, what's the impact on humans if I stop eating meat?
So for instance, eating the agricultural industry,
farmers, ranchers, truckers, all of them lose business.
It's also
that contributes to the greater good of humans.
But what do you think contributes more to the greater good of humans? Either making sure those people keep their jobs, or combating climate change?
Oh, well, now we've jumped into another realm.
The reason I ask is because the agricultural industry is the single biggest contributor to climate change.
Yes.
Far more than travel and things like that, all put together.
We always have in front of these guys 300 gallons of water. Across the way, we keep almost 400 gallons, and we do so down the other farm. We have a truck that's dedicated solely with a tank on it, filling it with water, and that's part of our daily routine.
There's about 319 million people living in the U.S., and the average American eats about 71 pounds of red meat and 54 pounds of poultry per year. Multiply that by America's population, and it will total 22.65 billion pounds of red meat and 17.23 billion pounds of poultry. Meat production requires more water than fruits, vegetables, or grains per pound. For example, 1 pound of beef requires 1,800 gallons of water, while 1 pound of wheat requires about 200 gallons of water.
So
those animals aren't going to go away when we stop eating them.
Well, no, yes, they are. I mean, once the demand... So there are currently unthinkable numbers of animals that are specifically being bred to be tortured and slaughtered. If the demand goes down, then they simply just won't be born anymore. And so the animals aren't going to go extinct.
So maybe the better solution is to do like a Thanos snap and eliminate half the human beings.
If you just kill half of the people on the planet, that's not good for human well-being.
See, and I'm not convinced we have an overpopulation crisis.
Okay, but even if we don't, you could say that one way to combat climate change would be to cut the population in half. Well, sure, another way to combat climate change would be
driving cars.
Would be to stop driving cars. But an even better way than both those things probably put together is to stop eating meat. And in fact, I think the single biggest thing that you can do as an individual to combat your personal, ecological footprint is to stop eating meat.
Raising livestock takes up a huge amount of water because we need to produce massive amounts of feed. Producing feed for animals not only takes up a lot of water to produce, but it takes up land that can be used to grow crops for humans. Cattle raised for meat consume equals to the caloric need of 8.7 billion people, more than the current population of 7 billion.
And if that's the case, then not only do we now have a situation where there is the whole argument of the ethical worth of animals, and that's one thing. You've now got this entirely separate argument about the environmentalism and how that's going to affect you and future generations.
So one of the things, and this is not... So first of all, having addressed, been presented with this before, I'm not even disagreeing with you on the impact and the way to change it. But the truth of the matter is, I think my objection here isn't even on moral grounds. It's on a matter of practicality.
Okay.
Because we know the overwhelming majority of people aren't going to take this step. And so an individual taking this step isn't going to contribute anything.
Yeah, but you can say the same thing about voting. But you can say the same thing about voting. But you can say the same thing about voting.
I would probably be a more moral person and probably be doing more for the world if I just stopped eating meat. Never remotely denied that. The thing is, the factors that would keep me eating meat under some circumstance, not all, have so far outweighed the factors that would make me stop.
And what are those factors, if you had to whittle them down?
Whittling them down is kind of difficult.
Raising animals for food also produces massive amounts of waste, approximately 130 times more than the entire human population. Farms which raise animals are also responsible for polluting our waterways with animal waste, pesticides, chemicals, fertilizers, hormones, and antibiotics. This is more than all other industrial sources combined.
So the climate change argument, by the way, is the strongest one of all of them for me personally. When other people presented this about, the impact of this, I'm like, yeah,
Right.
That's an issue. And if that's the case and I have accurate information, then yep, on board. But that's a separate issue from the types of moral arguments that I'm often presented with, which is, oh, don't kill the poor animals. Is there a way for me to eat meat where I don't have any of the immoral problem?
Like, people would just think that you just don't care enough about animals.
And they could be right.
Maybe we can practice doing punctual.
Yes, that's all I needed. I need it all.